Check it out, guys. I'm in another Subaru, and I'm in another Subaru Wilderness. These things are growing. This is a 2022 Subaru Forester Wilderness, and the Subaru Forester is in its 5th generation, and that's been with us for a few years now, but it's been refreshed for the 2022 model year, and that includes this all-new Wilderness trim. The Wilderness is one of 6 trims for the Forester now. That starts with the base, then the premium, then the sport, then this Wilderness, then you get the limited and the touring. Of course, this Wilderness is the most off-road capable version of Forester, and that's because it does have additional ground clearance, an extra ½ inch compared to the standard Foresters, 9.2 inches instead of 8.7. Now that is 0.3 of an inch less than the Outback Wilderness, but it actually has some other stats that are better than the Outback. You also get different suspension components and a different suspension tune to go with those different suspension components, and that's all tied to having the additional ground clearance. You get 17-inch wheels with a little bit more sidewall and Yokohama Geolandar all-terrain tires, just like the Outback Wilderness. You also get a front skid plate and this X-Mode system as well, which is kind of sort of like a 4-low-ish kind of setup where you get more engine revs for the vehicle speed that you're going. So the CVT intentionally gives you more engine revs for the speed you're going, which gives you more torque to put to the wheels. And of course, you also get this really nice 180-degree front view camera. The Subaru Forester remains a very competitively priced vehicle in the market. Base price for the base model is just $26,320. The base price for this new Subaru Forester Wilderness trim is $33,945. And my test car with the $1,850 options package cost $35,795. But let me give you a closer look at this Subaru Forester and take a look around and inside the car. All right, everybody, let's take a closer look at this refreshed for 2022 Subaru Forester. And this is a Subaru Forester Wilderness, of course, painted in autumn green metallic paint. Now, as far as visual cues that is a Forester, there are a few. Let me show you. You've got a unique front grille and front fascia, hexagonal fog lamps, matte black hood decal, 17-inch wheels and tires, and those are Yokohama Geolandar all-terrain tires, extra cladding above the wheel wells, and of course, a few badges. So I did briefly show you the front grille of this Forester Wilderness, but because all Foresters are refreshed for 2022, they all have a different unique front fascia and grille. This one is a little bit special because it's the Wilderness model. But generally speaking, like, you know, with the headlight design and things like that, that's going to be updates that you see across all 2022 Subaru Foresters. Looking at the car in profile, this definitely maintains more of the actual SUV look of Subaru's many SUVs. And just so you get a sense of its size, I'll put the dimensions up on the screen right now. And in case you're interested, I have full specs in the description. But there are a couple of interesting details, like this copper colored Forester down low just ahead of the rear wheel right there. And these brand new for all Foresters, beefy roof rails that Subaru says can now handle 220 pounds of dynamic load and 800 pounds of static load. Very, very nice. Also, this will give you a nice look of this big moonroof we have up there. Looking at the car in back, pretty standard Subaru, pretty standard Forester. One thing I like to point out that Subaru is really good at is you've got one nice single exhaust pipe right there. It's real, nothing fancy about it, no cladding on it. It just is what it is, the way it should be. All right, let's take a look inside. You are looking at 27 cubic feet of storage behind the second row right here, as well as a privacy panel right here and some hooks there. This is folding down the seats. Here's a charge port right there, more hooks. You get the same treatment on this side as well. And if you look up on the roof, this is new, you also have utility hooks here and here to give you more storage. And you can see right here, this can handle 3 kilograms or a little bit more than 6 pounds. So that's a nice touch. Also, it's broad daylight, but we do have stronger LED lights for when it's nighttime, so you have a better view of your storage in the dark. And we also have this nice rubberized floor mat as well. But let's say you need more than 27 cubic feet of storage, easy enough. And now you have 69 cubic feet of storage and room for yourself and a passenger. All right, let's take a look at those back seats. This being a nice and tall vehicle, step-in is a little bit on the high side, but we've got this cool plastic kick plate right here. It says Subaru and has these grooves in it. You've got more rubberized floor mats right here. And you do actually have a pretty nice and high seat bottom. I am 5'11" or 181 centimeters tall, and I've got decent thigh support here, less than a 90-degree bend in my knees, and at least 8 inches of knee room. That's really nice, especially considering this is not that big of a vehicle. Plus, we have multiple pockets here, which is kind of cool, and these are kind of bifurcated to give you smaller items here. We do have a couple more charge ports right there, and of course some space in the door for a bottle and some other storage, things like that. And if you don't have 3 passengers, hey, cup holders and an armrest. Why not? Oh, and I should mention, even though we have the big moonroof back here, which hurts headroom, we have plenty of headroom here. I've got a good 2-3 inches of headroom even with that. All right, let's go to the front. All right, pretty typical stuff here. Power windows, they are auto up, down, and front. Power locks, side view mirror adjustment, usual stuff there. You do have power adjusting seats, fore aft, seat back, lumbar adjust right there, and these nice aluminum pedals and more rubberized floor mats down here. And just in case you forgot from looking outside, it is in fact a Subaru Wilderness. Over here we have lots of buttons, including lift gate and stability control and auto engine stop start. We do also have tilt and telescoping steering. Pull this down right here, it is manually adjusting. Just like the Subaru Outback Wilderness, we do have StarTex material right here, and we also have Subaru Wilderness embossed into the headrest. You've got pretty decent upper and sufficient lower bolsters. It's not like you have a lot of grip here anyway, so it's really just fine. The Forester Wilderness is also adorned with this copper stitching right here and some copper metal accents here on the steering wheel and on the shifter. This X mode control center right here, and even the rings around the gauges in the instrument cluster here. Engine start right here. Like I said, those are in fact real gauges right there, and yet another clue that it's a Subaru Wilderness right there. We do have an 8-inch center console touchscreen. The base Subaru Foresters get a 6.5-inch screen. And this particular car does have the $1,850 navigation screen and other options as part of that. It's just an options package that includes that. That is $1,850. But the Subaru Forester also has this additional screen up here, which I really like, which gives you more of the basic information, HVAC, time, and those kinds of things. You know, range, left, average fuel economy, outside temperature, all that. So that's really nice to have in addition to this center console touchscreen right here. You do get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, but it is wired. Looking down, we have auto climate control. We have more storage right here. And if you look down here, you can see we have an auxiliary port, 2 more USB ports, and an additional standard charge port right there. Pretty standard looking Prindle, electric parking brake, heated seats with 2 modes right here. This is our X mode system right here. As you can see, we can do snow and dirt or deep snow and mud, and then we push to have it in normal otherwise. Couple of cup holders, some storage, little pocket of storage right here, and some more storage down here. And yes, that storage does include an additional charge port. Looking up, sunglass holder and controls for a nice big moonroof right here, but the privacy panel is manual, even though this is a big long roll, so you have to have long arms if you want to slide it back all the way. Also, one nice little feature that I always appreciate are sun visors. Of course, they're removable, but they also have these little sliders right here for additional shade. All right, let's get back to the drive. All right, let's talk powertrain. There is one and only one engine offered in the Subaru Forester, and that is a naturally aspirated 2.5 liter boxer 4-cylinder engine. And boxer means horizontally opposed or flat, so not in line like most engines, but opposite each other like that. You get 182 horsepower, 176 pound-feet of torque, which I will go ahead and say is adequate. And you also get what's becoming quite common in Subarus, which is a CVT transmission. However, there are a couple of tricks with that CVT. Despite not having any actual gears, you do have shift paddles for the CVT, and Subaru engineers put together 8 preset gear ratios for you to shift through if you want to. So we have upshift on the right side, downshift on the left, so you can go through it like a standard automatic transmission if you want to, but there are no gears. Also, this being a Subaru, especially being a Subaru with the moniker of Wilderness, this does of course have that all-wheel drive system, which makes that X-mode system much more useful. Now, despite being a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine that does not have that much displacement, fuel economy is only so-so. You get 25 miles to the gallon in the city, 28 miles to the gallon on the highway, 26 combined. Now, not only is that kind of meh fuel economy performance for a car this size, it's also a pretty big downgrade from standard Subaru Foresters, which gets 26 miles to the gallon in the city, 33 miles to the gallon on the highway, 29 combined. But there are very logical reasons for that. This being the Subaru Wilderness, you get the all-terrain tires, like I said. Those are not going to be as good for rolling resistance, so that's going to hurt your fuel economy a bit. Also, because of this Wilderness, you get different final drive ratios, 4.11 to 1 instead of 3.70 to 1 final drive ratios. And that means the engine is spinning faster for the wheel speeds. And considering what that does in terms of off-road capability, if you're interested in those types of things, I'm sure it's a perfectly happy compromise you're willing to make. But one thing that those different final drive ratios would help would be acceleration. And of course, I had to test that out. Let me show you that right now. All right, everybody, time for an acceleration test. See what this 2.5 liter flat 4 can do. I have the traction control off, and I do have a normal driving mode, but I also have all-wheel drive. So let's see how it goes. Bit of brake torque, about 2300 RPM, and here we go. Yep, yeah. All right, and the CVT is getting it up to near red line and just holding it there. And yeah, we're buzzing along and we're going just fine. Nothing remarkable about this, but nothing bad either. Yeah, so it's not fast. 182 horsepower, 176 pound-feet of torque for this off-roady SUV kind of thing. The CVT transmission didn't jerk us back into the seat, but it engaged reasonably well off the line. Certainly nothing to brag about, but it does its job just fine, and again, is as expected. Not bad, you know, it was fine. Nothing great about it, but certainly nothing frustrating about it or anything like that. The car is plenty quick enough to do what it needs to do. And speaking of things that this car needs to do, you are going to be on the road more times than you want to be, perhaps, and that road is going to have corners on occasion. Given all those things, let me show you how well this car handles. All right, everybody, time for a quick handling test in this Subaru Forester Wilderness. This is not something I expect to be some ace around a bunch of tight, twisty roads, but it's still good to know what it feels like and how it does. So here we go. Yep. No turbo, but we're getting up to speed okay. CVT is doing its job just fine. Whoa! We actually got a little bit of yaw there. Oh, that was fun. It was fun. Oh, yeah, lots of body roll, not a lot of grip. But, I mean, the body was controlled. It wasn't flopping around. It just leaned over a fair amount. Yeah, you get a lot of lightness when you go over crests like that. Yeah, even in this stuff here. You get a fair amount of body lean. So yeah, okay. Not at all a surprise. You don't have a lot of grip. You do have a lot of body roll. But the steering, considering everything, is reasonably tight and accurate. The turn-in response is actually okay. There's nothing fast or sporty about it, but there's also nothing scary or slow reacting or anything like that. So it was all expected and competent. And now you also have this soft suspension for more off-roading kit. And I should mention, by the way, that I had it in the normal driving mode and stability control off. Yeah, I mean, all-terrain tires, mega ground clearance, different suspension tune. It all adds up to the same thing. The flip side to having kind of ho-hum handling is that you've got a lot of tire sidewall, a lot of suspension travel. As a result, the ride is very comfortable on this road that I'm driving right now, and also on the interstate. I tested that as well. Let me show you that. All right, guys, time for an interstate test. Still in normal mode, but the stability control is back on. And as we get on the freeway, grip is still proving to be low. But hey, here we are. We do have adaptive cruise control. Subaru likes to call it system eyesight, and we will test that out right now. All right, so we are at a cruising speed of 78 miles an hour, turning just under 2,400 RPM, and the 2.5 liter is humming along just fine. Considering the robust roof rails of this Subaru and the off-roadiness and the extra ride height and all these things, wind noise is a bit elevated, but it's also a bit expected. Engine noise is a bit more present than is the case in a lot of cars these days. Seems like engineers have gotten really good at isolating out engine noise and making that just a distant rumble. You can still hear this naturally aspirated Subaru flat 4 pretty readily. You might have heard a little beep. There is kind of like lane departure warnings and things like that going on as well. Driver assist systems. Road noise is quite good. These Yokohama Geolandar tires are a really nice combination of all-terrain off-roading capability and still reasonable on road, and that's in terms of road noise, that's in terms of grip, that's in terms of all those things. It's actually a good, well-rounded tire. We've got real gauges in the instrument cluster, so those are really easy to see. The center console touchscreen, that's easy enough to read as well. There is a little bit of glare, but that's not an issue. We also have an extra elevated smaller screen up here. It's got a nice shade, kind of like an awning on it to cover the screen really well. So even in the sunlight, that's pretty easy to read. And more generally, the seats are comfortable. I've got good support there. And yeah, it's perfectly pleasant in terms of room and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit louder than I'd like. I'd prefer a better isolated cabin in terms of noise, but I could definitely soak up a lot of miles in this thing without too much trouble. Again, it'll be a little bit of a bummer that the freeway fuel economy is what it is when you're on that interstate, but otherwise, pretty comfortable. Now, this is an updated 2022 model car. Of course, that means modern safety, and the Subaru is no exception. So we've got plenty of driver assist systems, and Subaru has named theirs Eyesight, which is a nice array of systems, including adaptive cruise control and stuff like that. I'll put a list for you on the screen right there so you can get a sense of what it is. Pretty comprehensive list these days, but also more and more becoming quite common. But now we're inching towards topics that are closer and closer to the core purpose of this thing, and that is towing capacity. The Subaru Forester, despite having a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine and a CVT transmission, can tow up to 3,000 pounds if it's properly equipped. Now, that's not quite class 2 of 3,500 pounds, but, that gets you into a decent amount of small recreational equipment and gives you, some choices if you want to tow something with you on a weekend trip. So that was a nice surprise. But of course, none of that compares to its off-roading capability, and that is something where the Subaru Forester, considering what we started with, is pretty darn good. Overall, you do have less horsepower and less ground clearance to work with, so I would say ultimately this is a little bit less capable than the Subaru Outback Wilderness, but it actually has a couple of advantages when it comes to off-roading specs. You get an approach angle of 23.5 degrees, a breakover angle of 21 degrees, and a departure angle of 25.4 degrees. And all three of those figures are, of course, better than the standard Forester, but also better than the Subaru Outback Wilderness. And actually, that's not entirely true. The breakover angle of the Subaru Outback Wilderness is 21.2 degrees, so they're basically the same. Outback is slightly better. But the point is, the shape of this body is inherently a little bit better for approach and departure angles, so it actually gives you a bit of an advantage in that regard. And since I got the chance to do a little bit of an off-road test in the Subaru Outback Wilderness, I can attest that these Geolandar all-terrain tires work well to grip loose gravel and those types of things, and that car proved more capable than I would have guessed. Now, I'm certainly not an experienced off-roader, do not claim to be, but I have done it a few times just testing different cars out, and I was pleasantly surprised with what you could throw at the Outback. And I imagine that as long as you're not in a place where you really need a lot of power, that the Subaru Forester would largely keep up and be able to do the same. Given all that, what do we have here? Well, we have a new thing. This Wilderness sub-brand is definitely going to be a thing with Subaru. We have two of them now, the Outback and this Forester, and they're both following a similar theme. They definitely have a similar look, and you've got some interesting aspects to it. One of the most notable things about it isn't the fact that it has all this off-roading chops, but actually that you have such strong roof rails where you could put like a rooftop tent up there. You can carry quite a lot of stuff up there. So the idea is that you can have more and more adventures, and the Subaru will be able to carry you and all your stuff there. And it also means that if you want a tent just a little bit farther off the beaten path, go a little bit deeper into the woods, or get a slightly better vista for the sunset or the sunrise, you have a better chance at doing that in this Wilderness. But the other thing that's really important to know about this updated Forester is that it is definitely still a Subaru. You still have that distinctive boxer engine sound. You definitely have that distinctive, and I'm going to say quirky, Subaru look. You have good prices and good capability. You have these nice rubber floor mats so you can get the car muddy without worrying about it too much. And that includes these StarTex material upholstered seats, so you don't even have to worry about getting the seats too dirty. So the idea is that the Subaru isn't necessarily the fun thing to have on its own, but it's the vessel to take you to all the different fun things you want to do out in the world. And with the Wilderness, you can do a little bit more, carry a little bit more, just go a little bit farther. So if anything, the Subaru Wilderness is the most Subaru you can get. I'm Robin Warner. Thank you for watching. And if you are still watching, I would really appreciate it if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Those things really do help me out a lot. Okay, goodbye. All right, I'm gonna stay on the roads, but I got places to go. Naturally aspirated, here we go.